Hi, I'm Mark Washachek. My wife Sandy and I have been applying various practices to enhance soil health for quite a while in our garden, and I want to go over with you some of those techniques that we've used. We've been gardening for over 40 years, and we love growing plants. So my background is I worked for USDA, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, for 37 years, applying conservation practices. For the last 11 years, I've contracted with them, creating computer tools that help plan nutrient, pest, forestry, and small scale ag management. We also had an article written about our techniques that we use in our no-till gardening, and it was published by the Profiles in Soil Health in 2019. So in this slide set, I think what I'll go through is some of the soil health information in general, and then the practices and techniques we've used over the years, and then we'll talk about the using the produce because we produce quite a bit, and the birds and pollinators that we attract to the garden. And with that, we'll end it. So, how did we get started on this journey of soil health 40 years ago? Well, one of our main goals was to reduce the time and effort we put into weeding the garden. That seemed like was more than what was needed, and there must be a better way. So we began the journey. What is soil health? It's the continued capacity of the soil to function as a vital living ecosystem, sustains plants, animals, and humans. How can we improve it? Well, if we apply one of these five techniques, I think you'll help your soil health. Soil armor, keeping something on the surface at all times. Minimizing soil disturbance, that's no-till. Plant diversity, try to grow more than one crop on the same spot and alternate them year after year, move them around. Continual live plants and roots, yeah, have something green and growing just as long as you possibly can out there in your garden, and that will improve your soil health. Livestock integration, yeah, I'd have chickens or a goat or a sheep, but Sandy, she won't let me do that, so we won't be doing that. What are the benefits? Well, you have better soil structure. Without disturbance, you support microbial life and benefit the earthworms because you don't disturb their habitat. You then improve your moisture retention. The organic matter that's in the soil doesn't get burnt up by tillage, and you allow for a better water holding availability and reduced irrigation needs. So you almost have no soil erosion if you follow these techniques. Your plants will be much healthier, and that this will help you with nutrient availability and stronger root systems. And actually, the pest management will even be better if you use crop rotation and have diversity of plants that you plant, and if you make good selections as far as the varieties you pick. So it's all built, it builds on itself year after year, and you'll see that things just get better and better. Why would you change from conventional till to no till with a and from a no crop rotation to actually implementing crop rotation? I watched a neighbor, and in their garden they planted tomatoes year after year in the same spot. And they tilled the ground in the spring, they tilled it in the fall. And every year the disease would come early into their tomatoes, and the production was really, really low. So I watched that year after year and wondered why they did that. Then they moved, and I noticed the next year the whole garden area came up to Canada thistle, south thistle, and quackgrass. All of those rhizomes or the underground stems that they were tilling up, all they were doing is breaking them up and planting new plants. And by planting new plants, They just had a mess. That method was not sustainable in the long term. What is the ecological impact of improving your soil health? Well, the big picture is actually, we'll have more biodiversity in the soil, more diverse organisms, more fertile ecosystems. Excuse me. You reduce the carbon emissions by not tilling the ground because you're not making the underground material, the roots, decay fast when oxygen is incorporated into the system. And then that gives off carbon dioxide if you do that. You're not doing any of that, so you reduce carbon emissions. Also, and people don't think about this, I don't use a tiller. And so that gas that I'd use running the tiller spring and maybe even fall or whatever, I don't use that with emissions into the atmosphere. So we reduce carbon dioxide going into the air. These systems are much more resilient. If a new pest or bacteria comes along, they fight that much better if your soil is healthy. So I garden to improve soil health. That's kind of my goal. Now Sandy, my wife, well, you can see, she gardens so she doesn't choke people. No, that's actually a joke. That was a meme I saw online, and I had to take it and edit it and put her face in there because, one day she came home from her job. She works retail, and she had a really day that was had a customer that was really a pain, and so that's why I made that meme up for her. She really does it just to recharge her batteries, and she enjoys growing things too. So that was a joke. So what practices and techniques do we use? And how long have we used them? Well, we put in terraces 23 years ago. Built them out of block, and they reduce erosion, they increase water infiltration, and reduce nutrient loss. And I knew that from working in ag, that's what terraces would do. What did we learn from ours? We learned that a firm gravel base, extremely important for longevity. Ours haven't moved, but I made a really firm base under each terraced level of the block. I also learned that block terraces are a lot of work, as if I didn't guess that, but I learned that. And we had a 7-inch rain in about 24 hours here 4, 5, 6 years ago. And we learned that all of the rain that came in that storm infiltrated into the soil and nothing ran off. And that was because of terraces and the health of the soil. So why did we get started on this? Because Sandy didn't want to mow the hill. She said, Mark, I don't want to mow that hill. Let's have a terraced garden there. And it worked really nice. No-till. We have practiced for no-till for, I think I counted up 18 years. You don't disturb the soil structure. You get increased biological activities, including earthworms and microorganisms, because you don't disturb their home. And you're always feeding them, actually. Weed suppression. You're not planting weed seed down into the soil to give it good seed-to-soil contact. You're not doing that. It lays on the surface. Increased soil organic matter mainly comes from the roots of the plants that you never disturb, and that turns into organic matter eventually. So what did we learn from all this? Well, we do compost our own material. So when I dig up the potatoes or carrots, that's a good time to add the manure and compost back to the garden. We compost the vines and the stalks, anything above ground goes into the compost bin, and then we plant a cover crop, and that makes for a really nice uniform seed bed for the next year's garden. And if you're going to plant small seeded crops like carrots or lettuce, that type of thing, rake back the cover plant it, and I put back as much cover as I want over the top to protect it from rainfall and the sun and so on. So that works out really well. No-till has worked out great for us. I also gave my tiller away to the neighbor, and he liked that too. So uh, mulching, we have mulched, I think, all 40 years that we've gardened. It's great for weed control, water retention, and temperature moderation. It does those functions. Reduces the transmission of fungal disease by not allowing the spores in the soil for the rainfall to hit the soil, the bare soil, and bounce up onto the plants and transmit those spores up onto the plant. You've pretty much eliminated that by using mulch in your garden. And it builds soil organic matter. If I'm adding grass clippings to the surface, they eventually become organic matter. What did we learn from all that? Well, if you put on your grass clippings about 1 inch at a time, that's about right. Allow them to dry before you add the next inch to the garden. We had an early year where I just kept putting on green grass clippings on top of each other, and then it rained for 10 days. It sprinkled a little bit, and we got mold underneath. So I've learned to let them dry and then put some more on later. Not all grass clippings are good. Some contain weed seed or pesticide residue, so know where your mulch is coming from. I was living in Aurora, and I watched the neighbor dethatch his lawn in the spring, and I thought, holy cow, look at all that residue I could use on my garden. It's brown grass clippings, and I had it all bagged up. I'm gonna get that and use it, and I did. And then I fought crabgrass for the next 3 years in my garden. So, never took anybody else's grass clippings after that. This is something I learned from Dwayne Beck, and he ran the no-till irrigation farm out by Pierre. And he basically told us that if you control weeds for 3 years and you're really good at it, and don't let any go to seed, kill all the perennials that are out there first, and then don't let your annuals go to seed, you'll have very few weeds. And we've used this 3 different times when we had 3 different gardens as we moved around. This last one, we've been gardening it for about 25 years, but this works. If you're really adamant about not letting things go to seed as far as the weeds go for 3 years, there just aren't that many, you just don't have that many weeds to deal with. It's really a good approach, and it works. How about crop rotation? We use that also. Now, some people say, well, you're in such a small area, crop rotation, the pests will find the next crop. It's just, 10, 15 feet away or whatever. Well, that might be true for some, but it still breaks up cycles. I think you can lower your reliance on synthetic fertilizers and pesticides if you're growing legumes and rotating those in. It does increase yields, in my opinion, and we've done it for a long time. So it's just my opinion, but that's what I see. Not all pests get controlled with the rotation, obviously. Here's the Japanese beetle. That just hit us hard the last year or two. And so that rotation won't do anything for that. Even though our garden is small, I write down the rotation every year so I don't forget where I had things. I write down the variety I planted, the approximate yield, if it was good or not so good, disease problems, that type of thing, so that I can make better choices in the future with my variety selections. Also, our minimum rotation is 3 years. I'll plant a crop and then I won't come back for 3 years into that with that same crop on the same piece of ground. Actually, what we do is the top actually moves to the middle, and the middle moves to the bottom, and then the 3rd year it comes back to the top, but we flip-flop it. So on most crops we got actually a 6-year rotation, but like potatoes it's only a 3-year rotation. We compost all the surface residue from the garden, the stalks, the vines, everything goes into the compost bin. And if you do it right, that will eliminate the vast majority of any harmful pests, bacteria, insects, fungus, that type of thing. Works really well. If you put that compost and manure back to the garden, they supply the garden with vital nutrients and organic matter. So it's really a good system. What have we learned by doing that? Sandy told me when I first said about 20 years ago, we're going to have compost bin. She said, no, it's going to stink. Well, what we learned is they don't stink. You never smell them really. Build a bin close to the garden, and that reduces your hauling distance. I've moved it once in those 20 years. After the derecho, I had an opportunity to rebuild things, so I moved it a little closer. Use a minimum, in my opinion, 3 by 3 by 3. That's a minimum to ensure the pile has enough material in it that it heats up adequately. That seems to work well. Your ratio of material, probably 3 parts brown material, like brown tree leaves or that type of thing, to 1 part green, like fresh mowed grass. 2 to 1 works also. Don't get too hung up on the exact ratio for sure. And I don't put any meat, dairy, oils, pet waste, any of that stuff in. There's lots of reasons why you don't want to do that. I won't go into them now, but yeah, just keep that out. And I turn the pile at least once a year, and I add water to the pile from the hose if it gets really dry in a drought, that type of thing. So that's works really well. Built mine for nearly no cost because the neighbor, the derecho, took his fence out, and he gave me part of his old fence, so I used that to kind of shield it from the view of the yard, and Sandy appreciated that. Pest management. Okay. Yeah, there are pests out there, and we basically can reduce our chemical reliance if we do good pest management. We can protect the beneficial insects and pollinators and ensure our food is safe that we're growing. And what have we learned? Our pests are the weeds, the insects, the bacteria, the fungus, rabbits, squirrels, possums. It's a constant battle with pests, but the healthier your soil gets, the better it actually fights off many of these pests, the insects, the bacteria, the fungi. It has the ability to do that, and we've noticed that. I inspect the crops quite often. We use varieties that are disease resistant, the best we can find. Over our long experience, I really like Early Girl and Better Boy tomatoes. They seem to, and I grow different varieties every year just to test them and see how they work, and these seem to shine every year. Potatoes, Kennebec, Norland Red, and Norcota, those are ones I think have the best disease resistance. And actually in our garden, of all the things we grow, the only real problems we have with, say, blight would be potatoes and tomatoes. And it's probably because we grow so much of them, and the rotation isn't quite as long as the others, and that type of thing. However, we're going to grow potatoes and we're going to grow tomatoes, so we have to keep an eye on it and just do our best. So for these pesky rabbits, we don't use bait, we use a live trap. And the live trap is just a box trap that has a trip that they go in and hit the trigger, and it closes the door on them, and we haul them out of town. And so you don't need to bait it. It's just their curiosity will take them inside there. Mostly we catch them in the fall when it's just going into winter. We catch them in the spring just coming out of winter. They're curious at that point, looking for a new place to live, I guess. Possum, we've had a couple possums. They just kind of dig around looking for larvae in the soil, and we've trapped them with wet cat food and live traps and got rid of them. So that's not very hard to do. We also occasionally have a gopher or a vole, and we had a wandering muskrat one time. Our cat chases all those away, and there's a picture of our cat underneath here, but you can't see it, sorry. Um, so for the weeding, a few things sneak through. We do all our weeding by hand. I asked Sandy, and we agreed we average about 15 minutes a week weeding the garden area. And I spend about an hour a week scouting and occasionally spraying neem oil or hand picking insects like Japanese beetle or slugs. Neem oil is our friend. It's organic. Bacillus thuringiensis also, BT, that's also good for certain insects. That's also organic. So with that, we'll go on to what else did we learn that are pests? Well, we learned weather can be a pest. Our target to plant so that we don't get freezes is plant the cool seasons about April 20th if there's no 22-degree night in the forecast for 10 days. These are my rule of thumbs, and they've worked. I had 1 year out of 40 that I had frost get my tomatoes. And actually, I replanted, but I moved the ones that I thought were killed by the frost. I moved them in the garden just to see what would happen, and they survived and they produced. So it wasn't necessarily an absolute kill. Plant warm seasons about May 10th. That's the carrot, or that's the potato. No, excuse me. That's the tomatoes and peppers and that kind of stuff. If there's no 32-degree night in the forecast for 10 days, that's when I like to get them in. We adjust that every year a little bit, and watch the forecast. So we had wind. First picture there is wind. That was a real pest that year, but everything survived. It just was slow and took a long time to kind of get itself erect again. Sandy was going to stop a hailstorm from ruining a really good garden that we had in that top picture in the middle, and she covered everything up. She was a bit younger then, more energetic, I think. Nothing got hurt by the hail, but that's mainly because we didn't have hail that night, so she's never done that again. And then the bottom middle picture is hail that we had just last spring. And, plants got to survive or not. They're going to either make it or not. And these made it, but the corn was real slow. The tomatoes got injured. So we had some damage from that hail. And it was little pea-size hail, but it does little damage. And it says Mark can be a pest. Yes, I dropped a brick on a pepper plant one spring, and I broke the stem, and it was actually the middle of it was exposed. I taped it up, and then later I retaped it with duct tape so it could grow a little bit, more. And we had actually a pretty darn good harvest of peppers that year. So that was interesting. Controlled traffic. So what does that do for us? It minimizes soil compaction in the growing areas. It leads to increased yields. I know it does. We use a walkway down the middle, and the walkway is a place where we always walk, and we don't walk in the planted areas. And so that is the way that works. We obviously plant on beside the walkways, and we mulch those areas, but we don't grow really anything in these walkways. At the end of the growing season, about August 15th, we plant radishes, and the radishes can get this an 18-inch spade, so they can burrow down in there 18 inches, and they relieve the compaction, and it works really well. I like to plant them August 15th to September 1st. That's when I like to get those in, planted just in the walkways. So, yeah, you can see cover crops include the radishes in the walkways, but also include what we plant in the growing areas. So we'll get into that mixture. So how does that cover crop help us? Well, it does a lot of things. This is one of the better practices that anybody can implement if they want to. It improves the soil structure. You're not tilling the ground up to plant it. It increases your organic matter because there's roots that eventually become organic matter down there. And actually we leave the vegetation on the top, and that goes into the garden also, and that turns into organic matter also. So that all helps in water retention. It prevents erosion. It suppresses weeds. Weeds can't grow in there because we've got something growing, shading the ground. It has some effect on controlling pests and disease. If you put legumes in the mix, it can add nitrogen, but I wouldn't count on it adding a lot. Not in our climate. They don't grow long enough during the growing season to provide a lot of nitrogen. They attract insects, give them a home, and maybe even over winter, the beneficial ones can be there because you provided them some cover. And it itself, the cover crop, reduces compaction. So what do? We plant about 40% oats, 40% peas, that's field peas, and then 20% common vetch. That's by weight. So if you went to buy it, if you went to buy it at Millborn Seeds is where I get mine, I just tell them I want 2 pounds of oats, 2 pounds of peas, and 1 pound of vetch. And that will give you that basic mixture by percentage. So I plant it after the harvest of each crop. So some crops come out early, onions and lettuce and peas and those things. Those early season crops come out early, so then when I take them out, I plant my cover crop. But I always do it between August 15th and September 15th. If I plant it too early, they just go to seed and become problems for you the next year with wheat seed. If you plant them too late, they really don't accomplish the goal because there's not enough growth on them. Just simply spread the seed over the area and rake it in. Most years you don't need to water to get it to germinate. It just it's an easy thing to do. Yeah, it's cheap. 3 years of seed from Millborn cost me $3.43. That lasts me 3 years. I keep it what I don't use in the freezer over winter, and I'm ready the next fall. I've got it there, pull it out, spread it on the surface and rake it in, and boom, you got a cover crop again. Really, really good practice, easy to adopt, just got to kind of think it through. So here's another thing we learned. Okay, so I wanted to have something growing there as long in the growing season as I possibly could. Well, cereal rye fits that bill. You plant it in the fall, it grows in the fall, it goes dormant over winter, and then turns around, grows again in the spring. And so it could be growing in March and April when I have nothing growing there. I thought, this would be a good thing. It is extremely hard to kill. And so it took me like 3 weeks or more under the black plastic to kill it. I didn't want to spray Roundup on the garden. We don't put any herbicides on our garden. Matter of fact, we're as close to organic as you can get, and I'll explain that there's one thing we use that's not organic, and but other than that, everything we do is organic. It just wasn't worth the effort that I'd put into it. I also learned that when I mixed oats, peas, vetch, and turnips and radishes in the growing area, when I followed that, about the second year I had that mix, I followed it with potatoes and sweet potatoes in one of the tiers on our garden, and they both got scab. It might have been a coincidence, but it might have been too many root crops in a row, and that's what I think it was. So I just took the radishes and turnips out of the mix, and it's been fine ever since. All right, so then we went in the last few years, 2023 as a matter of fact, I put in drip irrigation. Always trying to do something that will help with our soil health, with our, effort that we put into the garden and get a little better production out of things. So what does it do? It delivers the water directly to the plant roots because you're dropping it on the soil surface. There's no evaporation loss, that type of thing. And with our mulch cover, you don't lose any of the moisture. It's more efficient, so you save water, you save money because you can put on a little less. And I think there's less disease because of the splashing we talked about earlier. And you have better nutrient uptake because you've got the soil with adequate water all the time. Even between plants, if you don't irrigate those areas, they get dry and it's less weeds coming up in those areas. So that works pretty well too. Yeah, you save time watering if you put in automatic timers, which is what I did on ours. So what we learned, I put a 1/2-inch line, let me get my pointer here, I put a 1/2-inch line from the faucet, which is right over here, buried it underneath our patio and put in a control box, which is what this is here. And in that control box, then I plumbed it so I could have a 4-zone timer. You can order them off the internet. They work really well. So the 4-zone timer, one tier is a zone, second tier is another zone, third tier is another zone, and Sandy likes to grow moss roses around the perimeter of every zone, so that's a zone on itself. All 3 together for her moss roses, that's a separate zone. So I can water different amounts at different times with the timer, and you know what? I say, this is a game changer, and it really was. We don't stand out there for dozens of hours a year watering the garden. It all does it on its own. We got it all programmed in. I can turn it off if we get a rain. It's very easy to use. This was really useful, productive, time saver. So I have 1/2 gallon per hour emitters for the tomatoes, peppers, and potatoes. I use a soaker hose for my corn, beans, peas, onions, carrots, and lettuce. All those last vegetables go in one tier. So here's the corn and beans, 2 rows of corn, 1 row of beans, 2 rows of corn, 1 row of beans. And so I have these soaker hoses running across, so it really irrigates all the soil in this tier. I hope I was using my pointer and not my red pointer. So it irrigates the entire area here because roots will occupy that entire area as close as we plant things. And then I put my peas, onions, carrots, and lettuce in the next section of that same tier. So I have soaker hose over there too. So there's a reason why we want to do that the way we do. My goal is about 1 inch of irrigation plus rainwater a week. And so if it rains an inch that week, I turn it off for a week. I think the cost was about $350 for all the parts. The labor was something that I did, so that didn't cost me anything. Game changer. Nutrient management. So up here I say if you get the water and nutrients right, it can do wonders for production. And the better the production, the healthier the plants, the healthier your soil becomes because you got more roots underneath and they're healthier and they fight the diseases better. It just all works together. So 2023, I wrote a spreadsheet that calculates up how much nutrients each vegetable crop needs and I did it in conjunction with South Dakota State University and the USDA NRCS. And it accounts for everything you put on your crop, and it tries to balance what the crop needs for maximum production. So in that year, I did all that, and we grew corn, and just as an example, the corn had 3.5 ears per plant. I know that's hard to believe, and I tell people that, and they said, no, that's not right. Yes, it is. I counted them 3 times. There were 3 tillers, basically, from each plant. So that means 4 stems per plant, and each stem had an ear on it. And so I only counted ears that measured 6 inches long or more. And so basically what it amounted to is we grew 84 ears from 24 plants. It was an amazing harvest. So the water was right, and the fertility was right, and the year was right. So yeah, I won't get that every year, I'm sure, but that sure worked out nicely that year. So how did we get to that point? Well, I had a soil test done for 2 years in a row, and in 22 in the fall, 2022 in the fall, I had a soil test done, and soil tests tell you what your level of nitrates, phosphorus, pH, what the pH is, what your organic matter percent is, give you a lot of good information. So, for example, I had 47 pounds of nitrate in the soil. My parts per million of phosphorus was 125. Had a 5.4% organic matter, and my pH was 7.2. Those to me are important things that you want to look for in any kind of soil test. By the way, I use AgVise laboratories over in Minnesota. I'd recommend them. I trust them. They do good work. So getting the soil test helped set the baseline of what the nutrients were in the soil in my garden. So I worked with a gal that she was complaining about her tomatoes weren't growing well. The new tissue always looked diseased. Her production was terribly low, and she grew more than 100 tomato plants every year in her garden. And so she did a soil test. It came back, phosphorus levels were 750 parts per million. What's normal would be maybe 25 to 150 parts per million in a garden. So it's tremendously high. Once you get over 500 parts per million, you start to have issues with your plants being able to take up other micronutrients and to grow. And she had that problem. Her plants couldn't really take up iron and zinc from the soil because of the phosphorus levels in her soil. So when you do the soil test, you can help yourself diagnose problems, knowing if you have real issues. Yeah, that was very helpful for her to do that soil test. So I talked about that nutrient management spreadsheet that I put together. What it does is it looks at recommendations from Midwest Vegetable Guide. You can get a copy of that guide going to this website and use it, and it tells you basically what's good and as far as fertility goes for your garden, for your different vegetables. Very good guide. SDSU also puts out a Fertilizing Gardens in South Dakota. You can go to their website and get that publication. So with these, this is the 2 that I put into the spreadsheet, and it does kind of the calculations automatically for you. But just as an example, that year, actually this was last year, had these crops, and tier number 2 had potatoes, tier 3 onions, 3 had peas, 3 had carrots, tier 3 had lettuce, 3 had corn, like I told you before, 3 had beans, and then tier 1 had tomatoes and peppers. All right, so the soil test came back 47 pounds per acre of nitrate nitrogen. It had 125 parts per million of phosphorus. So we look at those things, those are important. And then I calculate how many pounds per acre of N, P2O5, and K2O did I put on based on what I added to the garden. And the recommendation, actually, this is the recommendation from the Midwest Guide, is 103 pounds of N, in addition to what's in the soil, 47 pounds, to grow potatoes. Okay, and if my head weren't in the way, you could see I put on about 108 pounds of N on my potatoes, so almost matched that identically. And that's what this spreadsheet helps me do. Helps me not under-apply or over-apply the nutrients. So this is the second page of the spreadsheet, another page of the spreadsheet, and here's the potatoes and everything I added to my garden uh, on the potatoes. Horse manure in the fall before, compost fall before. The year before I put on this starter, this 13-13-13, and I eliminated that because I have too much phosphorus probably, but I certainly don't need to add any more. So that helped me make a decision on what to eliminate, how to change my nutrient management plan. I actually added ammonium sulfate because I could use a little sulfur. It was on the lower end, and I needed the nitrogen in there. It's nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium are these three numbers, percent of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So I added some ammonium sulfate and I added some urea, which is 46% nitrogen. And those two things are not organic, but they're commercial fertilizers. Farmers use them all the time. I also put on grass clippings, and they have nutrients in them. And so what this does is it totals up all of the nitrogen that's added, all of the phosphorus that's added, P2O5, and it tells us the summary up here of what I put on and then what was recommended. And you can see, you can adjust what you're doing based on the inputs from the spreadsheet. So I really like it. It's really useful for me and it helped me get my nutrients, I think, in balance. One other thing, we grew potatoes last year. I grew them on 84 square feet, my potatoes. That's 6 foot, that's like 2 steps by almost 5 steps, 14 foot. An area, that's as big as the area I grew the potatoes on, 84 square feet. And we grew almost 100 pounds of potatoes on that small area. So that's really good production. And it's important to get the water and the nutrients right if you want good production. And that's the point there. All right. So what do we do with all this production? And we have quite a bit of it. Well, what do we do with it? Sandy cans it. She makes salsa. She makes pasta sauce. She makes stewed tomatoes. She's really good at all this, storing these vegetables so we can eat them over winter. She dehydrates it. The onions are dehydrated and used in soups and stews, fried potatoes, salsa, a lot of other things. We also eat some fresh onions. And she freezes it. We got a French fry maker, which you put a potato in and push the lever and you get French fries out of it. And she does all the other work in preparation to freeze the potatoes. And then we air fry them in the winter and eat potatoes in the winter. It's really great. Carrots are frozen, used in stews and soups and carrot cake. My favorite, by the way. So that's how we use a lot of that. And we also provide a lot of habitat for birds and pollinators because we think they're important also. And they help in the garden health. So here's a few of our favorite plants. I won't go through any of them. I'll just show you that we have all these flowers growing in our yard and they really attract a lot of birds and pollinators. So here's a few pictures of the birds that are in our area. We get probably a dozen different species that come through and enjoy our yard. And a few of our favorite pollinators, and I really like the one where in the middle center where the bottom middle where the bumblebee is getting out of the rain underneath a leaf on a hyssop plant. Smart guy. He's trying to dry off. So yeah, we provide a lot of habitat. And all these pictures we took in our yard, and we just love that kind of a thing. So at the end of the day, what do we think? Well, our conclusion is that if we embrace and have embraced soil health gardening, it improves our production, it conserves resources, it promotes vibrant gardens, healthy gardens, and supports environmental health also. And so we're sold on it. Are we locked into exactly what we're doing right now? No, we never are. We're always thinking of what can we do that improves things. What's next? I'm not sure. And Sandy's not exactly sure. But maybe we'll think about, I've thought about for years adding beneficial insects. You know, you can buy lady beetles and lacewings and this kind of thing and parasitic wasps, turn them loose in your garden. So that might be a thing. I thought about changing to all organic fertilizer, but boy, I'm kind of cheap. And if you look, I use that 4600. I would change it to blood meal probably is what I would do. So at Walmart, you can get 4600 for $3.60 a pound for the N. I get it from the co-op, and I use it on my lawn also. It cost me 60 cents per pound for the N, for a pound of N. Blood meal cost, I just looked up one, and it was $23.80 per pound for its N. I don't think I can really switch out. It would be probably a little bit of a benefit, but since I put my urea on and spread it over time, I apply it in the spring, I apply it in the middle of summer, so split apply, I put it on with residue, I water it in. I don't think I'm hurting the micro environment, the bacteria, the fungus. I don't think I'm hurting them much. They say it might be a bit of a shock to the system. Well, from my results and my yields, I don't think I'm getting that. So, companion planting. This will probably happen. They say planting basil next to the tomatoes, having marigolds around in your garden. I think we'll probably adopt some of that in the future. So with that, I think I've covered everything. I just would ask if there's any questions.